I'm Melinda Grace, and welcome to Everyday Extraordinary Women, the channel that's all about highlighting everyday women doing extraordinary things in their communities. In today's episode, we're going to meet Michelle Jewsbury, who's written a book about domestic violence. So grab a cup of tea and join us. Hi, and welcome to Everyday Extraordinary Women, the channel that's all about getting the stories of everyday extraordinary women out there into the world. Today, I have an amazing guest with me. Her name is Michelle, and I'm so excited that you get to hear her story. I really believe that it will be empowering. So I met you because you had written a solo show at the Fringe Festival. It was really powerful. I couldn't even stay after and talk to you or really to anyone else because I just had to go process what I had seen. I was just really impressed with your vulnerability and how you care for people in the world. I felt like your story needs to be out there and more people should hear it. So thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Melinda.
You have written a book that is based on your personal experience with domestic violence.
Yes.
So how can you share with us how that journey started for you?
The male counterpart and I ended up breaking up October 2014. And right after we broke up, I just felt urged to document everything that had happened to me. And the reason why I wanted to write in general, doing the solo show and now the book, is so I can empower men and women worldwide with this topic. Because, I could have died a couple of different times. Mm-hmm. And this happens more times than not. And it's really sad that there are not more voices out there that are combating the situation, mm-hmm. that are telling the story. So I felt compelled to write a book.
Let's rewind then and go back to the beginning. How did you meet him? How did you get into this relationship?
So I've actually known him for 9 years. We had actually met at business functions and we were acquaintances. So I was living in Portland at the time and he was in California. And I ended up moving to California. He ended up contacting me and wanted to date me. So he took me out to lunch and it was great. Gave him a hug and said, see you later. And then he's like, I want to take you on a real date. He came to LA and wowed me. We stayed at a very lucrative hotel. We went to an amazing fancy restaurant for dinner where we sat and laughed and talked. And
it sounds like a movie.
Yeah, it was. He wowed me like it was in a movie. And I was swept away.
You're like hook, line, and sink.
Pretty much. From then on, we were inseparable. We were dating. Mm-hmm. And then 5 months later, I ended up moving in with him up north.
So when did the abuse start?
First time my head went through the wall was before I had moved in.
Before you had moved in?
Yeah. So about 4 months into the relationship.
Wow. And what would set him off?
Anything. So he gets triggered by the most mundane of situations. I could be watching a television show for too long and he'll get set off. The emotional abuse and manipulation happened all the time. The physical abuse, he was blackout drunk a lot of the times and taking out his anger on me. And he has anger that he has not yet dealt with. And hurting people hurt people. So he hurt me.
Is there a reason behind that?
Well, there's a cycle in domestic violence, and it goes from seemingly walking on eggshells, mm-hmm. and then there's a big blow up emotionally, sexually, or physically. And then there's the adoration stage. The I love you, I'm sorry, I'll do anything you want. And it's that stage that tends to keep a lot of victims, women, in my case, in domestic violence relationships.
Can you explain more the emotional abuse? What did that look like?
Slut, whore, what the hell are you doing? You don't do anything all day. Oh, you still have cellulite on your butt. Should be going to the gym more often. Stuff like that. Yes.
That's rude.
Yeah, very rude. Yes, rude comments. And, he would just get angry and yell. But the problem is in that cycle, you walk on eggshells. I was walking on eggshells. I'm like, oh, I don't want to upset him in any way. I don't want him to snap, right? And then he'd snap, whatever that was, being, a whole evening of him screaming bloody murder at me or physically abusing me. And in one instance, sexually abusing me. And then there's that after stage where he would grovel to me and, I love you, Michelle. You mean the world to me. And it was very confusing. One time, I was beaten so bad for 4 hours in a hotel room. And the next day, he woke up crying, looking at me, and then he proceeded to take me shopping. Hired a personal shopper and took me shopping and spent like over $2,000.
Do you think were you in love with him?
Oh yeah, 100%. Even now, it's difficult. I had dreamt about this Prince Charming, like every little girl does, and I dreamt that he was my Prince Charming, that we could have this fairy tale life together. People ask, why'd you stay? Well, it wasn't all bad. There was great moments too.
And you probably see like potential in him, right?
I did, yes. And I wanted to help. See, that's the problem. A lot of women want to help their partner, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to help him. I knew about some things that he was dealing with, and it made me have sympathy for him. That's another stage in a domestic violence relationship. The man making you feel sorry for them and getting you on board for their cause.
Right.
So you'll stay.
Didn't you miss your friends? Like, how did you stay away from your friends for so long? Was he just that manipulative and like that compelling?
So I moved from LA.
Right.
And I had lost a lot of friends in LA because of that move. And he wouldn't let me come back. So I asked permission on a lot of things. For example, there was one time he went out of town on a business trip, and I wanted to take a drive to Los Angeles to see my friends.
Of course.
I wasn't allowed to.
Because?
He wouldn't let me. I don't want you hanging out with those people. Those people aren't good for you. He would verbalize his opinions and thoughts about other people, about people who I would hang out with, and why they weren't good for me. There was one time where I had a good friend, and she had brought me into the bathroom with her at this hotel and told me, hey, you need to get out of this relationship. I see red flags and I see signs. After she had left, he came to me and said, I heard what she said. She's a slut, and she's just telling you this so you'll break up with me. And at that point, he said, you can choose her or me. And I chose him. So yes, I missed my friends. And I didn't tell anybody about what was going on. To my daddy, who is now no longer with us. Be like, oh, no, he takes care of me, daddy. But a lot of women and men do that in abusive relationships.
What was the moment that you knew you had to break out of this tumultuous relationship, and how were you brave enough to do it?
Well, with every domestic violence relationship, there has to be a breaking point. Whatever that breaking point is for somebody. For me, it was when I found out about the affairs. So I put up with the violence, the emotional abuse, the manipulation, the financial manipulation as well. And I found out that he had been cheating on me. And I knew from that point, I'm like, this is not a good, healthy relationship. And I wanted to get out, and I started to make a plan on how to get out, and it was very, very difficult. I actually left him in our 3-year relationship over 5 or 6 different times, moved all of my stuff out twice, and moved all of my stuff back in. And in most domestic violence relationships, that happens. It's typically between 5 and 7 times that the victim leaves their abuser before finally getting out.
So where are you now with the healing process?
Well, I'm in therapy, thank God. Because
we all need a little therapy.
We all need a little therapy for sure. But I feel like because of what's happened to me, I need to share my story.
What is the biggest thing that you've learned from this journey?
The biggest thing I learned is it wasn't my fault. That's one thing that I can definitely tell other people when you're in this situation. It's not your fault. No matter how many times he tells you that it's your fault, it's not.
Did you realize that through therapy?
I was away from him after we had broken up, you know, even though there was a year of financial and emotional abuse, I didn't see him. So I started to be like, I don't think that he's right about everything. So having distance from the physicalness of the relationship, I just started, wow, that couldn't have been my fault, you know? So it was more of an epiphany over time.
Right, and you were also like documenting
I
things
was,
too, and that
yeah.
probably helped you be
It
like,
did.
wait a minute.
Because if I shared any of that information with a close friend or anything, they're always like, why didn't you tell me? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I'm like, I didn't even think it was that bad.
Well, I'm glad you realized that's not your fault.
Yeah, thanks.
And that you're here,
Yeah,
and like you've come through it. But what advice would you say to women who are in a relationship that might be similar to this right now and they want to get out?
Get out sooner rather than later, because the emotional and physical violence could turn into death potentially, and recognize the signs. But the one thing that I would like to suggest is to their friends and family, if you have a friend and you notice that they're in an abusive relationship, the best thing to do is still be their friend. Don't leave them, because there's going to be a point where they're going to realize that they're in an abusive relationship and they're going to need you. Most of the homeless women on the streets in Los Angeles, they are homeless because they were in a domestic violence relationship and they left. Leaving is so difficult, but leaving without anybody, that's even harder.
You are so generous and gracious, and you actually have an overall vision or idea that you would love for women to hear about turning lemons into lemonade. We all have our own lemons. Like, what would you say to us?
I wouldn't suggest that they go write a book or a solo play. I just suggest that they do something. So don't hide it deep down inside of you. You need to speak, because you have a voice and people need to hear what you have to say. And God makes beautiful things out of broken pieces. So he will use your story. And that's amazing.
The most important piece.
What?
When and how can we get a copy of your book?
The title of my book is called But I Love Him. And like I said, my editor, Jim Marduka, and I are submitting to publishers in January. So hopefully it'll be published, mid next year, 2017. And then, of course, I've got a website as well. So MichelleJewsbury.com, and I will keep that updated and post when the book is going to be released, and if there's book signings and my next speaking engagements.
Great. And I'll put all that information down below. And if you enjoyed this interview and you found it empowering and inspiring, go ahead and subscribe to this channel so you can hear more inspiring women.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yay.
Thank you so much for joining our show today and hearing Michelle's story. Again, if you'd like to follow her, all of her information is below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to hear more stories of empowering women.